Good artists copy, great artists steal. Although its true origin is still debated, with some crediting Pablo Picasso and others pointing to Igor Stravinsky, the saying has become legendary in the art world. It invites us to consider the difference between merely imitating an idea and reworking it into something entirely new and groundbreaking. In this context, copying means sticking to the surface, a pale echo that will always be compared to the original masterpiece. In contrast, stealing is about absorbing an idea, understanding its essence, and then transforming it so completely that it bears your own signature. It's not about plagiarism, but about building on the best ideas to lead the way. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, embraced this philosophy wholeheartedly. He famously adopted the notion that great artists steal as a core part of Apple's innovative spirit. In the 1970s and 80s, Apple's bold approach turned heads in Silicon Valley. But as with any fast-moving field, someone else was always ready to challenge the status quo. Just as Apple's pirate spirit began to dominate, a new contender emerged from Seattle: Microsoft. This set the stage for the intertwined histories of Apple, Microsoft, and IBM, as each giant strove to redefine the future of computing. To understand this epic journey, we must begin at the dawn of the computer age. In 1946, the ENIAC, the first electronic digital computer, was unveiled in the United States. Originally designed for military calculations such as computing ballistics trajectories, it laid the groundwork for a technological revolution. In 1954, IBM, already a leader in mechanical and punch card systems, entered the electronic computer arena with the IBM 650. Just a few years later, the introduction of the IBM 1401 rapidly propelled IBM to dominance in the computing market across the United States, Europe, and Japan. For a time, IBM was the epitome of American technological prowess, though its focus was squarely on large mainframe systems for banks, hospitals, governments, and other large organizations. The idea of a computer for everyday use was still distant. That changed with the advent of the microprocessor in the mid-1970s, which paved the way for personal computers. The launch of the Altair 8800 in 1975 is often credited as a catalyst for the personal computing revolution, sparking the creation of more than 270 different microcomputer designs in just a few years. Among these innovators, Apple stood out. Founded in a garage by the charismatic Steve Jobs along with Steve Wozniak, Apple soon began to change everything. Shortly after its founding in 1976, Apple introduced its breakthrough product. The Apple I set the stage, but it was the launch of the Apple II in 1977 that truly revolutionized personal computing. With its integrated keyboard and display, the Apple II captivated audiences, especially at the West Coast computer lair, and went on to sell nearly 6 million units over its lifetime. Jobs' relentless work ethic and innovative vision propelled Apple into serious competition with established giants like IBM. IBM, however, was slow to embrace the personal computer revolution. Deeply entrenched in its mainframe business, the company eventually entered the market in 1981 with the IBM PC Model 5150. Crucially, IBM adopted an open architecture separating hardware and software, which allowed third-party developers to contribute and innovate. As Jobs later noted, IBM's genius was getting everyone else on board. A key partner in this strategy was Microsoft. Founded in 1975 by Bill Gates and Paul Allen, Microsoft initially made its mark by developing a version of BASIC for the Altair 8800. While many early tech enthusiasts freely shared software, Gates had a clear, profit-driven vision. Microsoft quickly became the supplier of choice for BASIC, and its version became an industry standard, helping secure major contracts with companies such as General Electric and NEC or Nippon Electric Company. This early success, however, led to disputes with MITS, the company behind the Altair 8800, which had given Microsoft its first big break under a licensing agreement. In a contentious legal battle in 1977, Microsoft ultimately retained the rights to its version of BASIC, a decision that Gates later defended as necessary given MITS's declining prospects. This early success, however, led to disputes with MITS, the company behind the Altair 8800, which had given Microsoft its first big break under a licensing agreement. In a contentious legal battle in 1977, Microsoft ultimately retained the rights to its version of BASIC, a decision that Gates later defended as necessary given MITS's declining prospects. Even though Apple II was a major success, users soon found its built-in BASIC inadequate, especially when handling floating-point calculations. Seeking improvements, Apple turned to Microsoft. At that time, Apple was already a rising star while Microsoft was still a small outfit. Gates seized the opportunity, and Microsoft signed a deal reportedly for around $31,000 to provide an enhanced version of BASIC as well as to develop a spreadsheet program called Multiplan. Although this early collaboration was modest, it set the stage for even larger partnerships, Microsoft's real target being IBM. By 1980, eager for a breakthrough, Gates pivoted his focus. Initially, he sought to promote his widely popular BASIC programming language to IBM, believing it would be a key component of their forthcoming PC. However, during discussions, he realized that IBM's primary need was not a programming language but an operating system. Despite having nothing to offer at the time, Gates boldly signed a contract with IBM, committing Microsoft to deliver the required software. Recognizing a historic opportunity, he swiftly acquired an operating system called 86-DOS from Seattle Computer Products for roughly $50,000. Renamed MS-DOS, it was provided to IBM under a licensing arrangement, a move that not only filled the last piece of IBM's PC puzzle but also laid the foundation for Microsoft's meteoric rise in the software industry. Although MS-DOS was not originally developed by Microsoft, its widespread adoption transformed the company's fortunes and exemplified its aggressive, opportunistic approach. Learning from the MIT's dispute, Gates deliberately chose to license MS-DOS rather than sell it outright. By charging a modest fee per machine, Microsoft ensured that its operating system would be installed on virtually every PC, thereby cementing its status as the de facto standard in personal computing. Crucially, Gates also negotiated terms that allowed Microsoft to license MS-DOS to other PC manufacturers, a decision that proved to be a masterstroke. As IBM's PC architecture was widely cloned, MS-DOS became the operating system of choice across the rapidly expanding personal computer industry, further solidifying Microsoft's dominance. This divergence led to two distinct paradigms in the market. On one side were IBM and Microsoft, champions of an open architecture where hardware and software developed independently. On the other side was Apple, with its closed, integrated system that embodied Jobs' vision of a seamless user experience. This fundamental difference would define the rivalry between the companies for years to come. Yet in the fast-paced tech world, no model stays dominant forever. After the success of the Apple II, Jobs began looking for the next big breakthrough. His team urged him to visit Xerox PARC or Palo Alto Research Center. This research facility was established by Xerox in 1970 to explore digital technologies beyond its core copier business. Researchers there had developed laser printers, the computer mouse, Ethernet networking, object-oriented programming, and, most strikingly, the graphical user interface GUI. Despite these pioneering inventions, Xerox failed to capitalize on them because its headquarters remained focused on its highly profitable copier business. Recognizing an opportunity, Jobs negotiated a deal with Xerox. In exchange for access to PARC's innovations, Xerox would receive 100,000 shares of Apple stock at a nominal price. Although Xerox's executives did not fully grasp the potential of these digital breakthroughs at the time, this deal would later prove extraordinarily lucrative for them. Initially, the PARC researchers were hesitant to reveal the full scope of their work, offering only limited demonstrations such as a primitive word processor. And willing to settle, Jobs pressed for a comprehensive tour, eventually convincing Xerox to grant full access. The Apple team was astounded by what they saw. Although PARC had developed several cutting-edge technologies, Jobs was especially captivated by the GUI. At a time when computers relied solely on text-based command lines, the idea of an interface featuring intuitive icons, windows, and folders was revolutionary. Jobs was convinced that this was the future of computing, and he was frustrated that Xerox had let this goldmine slip by. Apple's bold appropriation of the GUI from Xerox PARC has since been labeled one of the most significant intellectual heists in tech history. Jobs was unapologetic about stealing great ideas. After all, innovation often involves reimagining existing concepts. Moreover, Apple didn't just adopt the technology, it also recruited several key PARC researchers to help build a team that could bring the GUI to market. 3 years later, in 1983, Apple introduced the Lisa, one of the first commercially available computers featuring a graphical user interface. The Lisa was an impressive machine, offering a mouse, built-in hard drive, GUI, multitasking capabilities, and more. However, its nearly $10,000 price tag proved to be a fatal misstep. To put this in perspective, $10,000 in 1983 had the purchasing power of roughly $25,000 to $30,000 today. That sum could buy a brand new mid-range car, cover a full year's college tuition, or even serve as a substantial down payment on a house. Meanwhile, the Apple II that had built Apple's reputation started at just about $1,300 for a basic model or $2,600 for a more advanced one, and even an IBM PC with a decent setup was priced around $1,500. No wonder consumers balked at the Lisa's cost. Nevertheless, Lisa was a necessary stepping stone. As the saying goes, without Lisa, there would be no Macintosh. The Macintosh, which embodied Jobs' vision of elegant, user-friendly computing, laid the foundation for future Apple innovations like the iMac. Ironically, the turmoil surrounding Lisa's development contributed to internal conflicts that eventually led to Jobs' departure from Apple. During this turbulent period, however, Apple and Microsoft found themselves collaborating once again, a partnership that would significantly reshape the competitive landscape. Even as Microsoft's influence continued to grow, after the Lisa setback, Jobs recognized that the Macintosh needed a robust suite of software. He returned to Microsoft with an ambitious vision, a future where personal computers featuring graphical user interfaces would be ubiquitous, and where Microsoft software would run on virtually every machine. Although this vision was aspirational, Gates saw its potential. Microsoft committed to developing a comprehensive suite of GUI-based applications for the Macintosh, including early versions of what would eventually evolve into programs like Word and Excel. Gates even assembled a team of roughly 20 engineers, a group informally associated with the Macintosh project, and arranged for them to visit Apple's headquarters to see the Macintosh in development. Although the Mac was still a work in progress, Apple demonstrated its capabilities at one point, showing the software running on a Lisa to highlight the GUI. Gates was not only impressed by the interface but also became increasingly aware that Microsoft had the capability to develop its own GUI systems. This realization sowed the seeds of future rivalry, as Jobs worried that Microsoft might eventually replicate and even surpass the Macintosh experience. After these initial events and once the first agreements were signed, Steve Jobs remained deeply uneasy about Bill Gates and, by extension, every partner involved stealing Apple's groundbreaking graphical user interface. Drawing on past experiences as a cautionary tale, Jobs insisted that, starting in January 1983, the same month the Macintosh was slated to launch, Microsoft be contractually barred from developing any other GUI software for at least 1 year. In Jobs' view, that 12-month window would be more than enough for Apple to build an unbeatable first-mover advantage in the emerging GUI computer market. After all, once the Macintosh made its public debut, the world would see the GUI clearly, and even if Microsoft had chosen not to develop its own version during that period, someone else eventually would. Gates agreed to the clause, at least for that 1-year period. Notably, Jobs was both combative and overconfident. He believed that even if Microsoft had a blueprint in the form of the Macintosh, they simply lacked the vision and technical prowess to build a comparable operating system. He wasn't shy about his opinions. In public and in private, Jobs disparaged Microsoft's early applications as shoddy and even went so far as to suggest that Gates might have benefited from a little meditation or perhaps even some unconventional inspiration in his youth. Despite his scathing remarks, however, Jobs still needed Microsoft's software support for the Macintosh. And for Gates, despite his natural ambition, caution was the name of the game. Over time, a curious relationship began to develop. Gates became a frequent visitor at Apple, even joining the Macintosh team for dinners, quietly observing Jobs' unique leadership style and magnetic personality. Likewise, Jobs often returned the favor by visiting Microsoft headquarters, engaging in lengthy discussions with Gates, and occasionally venting about internal challenges. One notable turning point came when Microsoft delivered its version of Excel to Apple. In a surprising departure from his usual harsh critiques, Jobs offered praise for the product and even brokered a secret deal with Gates. Under the agreement, if Microsoft committed to developing Excel exclusively for the Macintosh for the next 2 years, foregoing any PC version, Apple would dissolve its in-house BASIC team and continue to rely on Microsoft's BASIC indefinitely. Although Gates readily accepted this proposal, a move that would later prove beneficial for Microsoft, it stirred internal resentment at Apple. Many Macintosh engineers grumbled at Gates's relentless questioning of even the smallest technical details, such as insisting that the Macintosh's remarkably smooth, non-blinking cursor movement must be achieved with some special hardware, revealed a stubborn, overly analytical mindset that failed to appreciate the elegant simplicity of Apple's design. In those early days, the financial disparity between the two companies was stark. While Microsoft's annual sales had just surpassed $100 million, Apple was raking in roughly $1.5 billion a year. Outsiders often joke that after trailing IBM for so long, Microsoft was now trying to play second fiddle to Apple. Jobs' capricious nature added fuel to the fire. He would sometimes dismiss Microsoft's contributions outright, even remarking that Apple doesn't really need you, we're doing something great. Despite his high-handed attitude, however, Jobs was forced to cooperate with Microsoft because the future of the Macintosh and indeed, Apple's very survival depended on a robust ecosystem of applications. After all, the killer app VisiCalc had once driven hordes of business users to buy the Apple II, and Jobs was convinced that Microsoft's Excel could play a similarly pivotal role on the Macintosh. In November 1983, the tension came to a head. When Gates demonstrated an early version of the Windows operating system, Jobs was unmistakably dismissive, arguing that its design and user experience fell far short of what Apple had achieved. Yet, when Gates later announced that Microsoft was moving forward with a GUI for the IBM PC, Jobs found himself cornered by the very contractual rights he had reluctantly granted. Incensed, he publicly lambasted both Gates and Microsoft, accusing them of shamelessly copying Apple's innovations. The situation escalated when Jobs demanded a face-to-face meeting. Walking into Jobs' office one day, Gates found the room packed with a dozen or so silent, seething Macintosh engineers. Almost immediately, Jobs exploded. "I trusted you and now you're stealing our stuff." After allowing his tirade to run its course, Gates calmly offered an analogy. "Steve, imagine we all lived next door to a very wealthy neighbor Xerox. I marched into their house to snatch a TV, only to discover you'd already taken it away." That remark silenced the room, if only momentarily. For the next 2 days, Gates stayed at Apple's headquarters, engaging in intense negotiations with Jobs. He pleaded that, despite the disagreements, the Macintosh remained the computer he believed in most, and he subtly warned that a complete fallout could mean Microsoft might eventually stop developing software for Apple altogether. Jobs, acutely aware that the Macintosh's future and the continued popularity of Excel as the natural successor to VisiCalc depended on Microsoft's cooperation, found himself having to accept a precarious balance. In the end, although Jobs reluctantly agreed that Microsoft could continue its R&D so long as their products didn't mimic Apple too closely, Gates' own team later recalled him urging his engineers, "Why can't it be even more like the Macintosh?" It was a telling moment. The old adage, "good artists copy, great artists steal," had come full circle, perhaps more so on Microsoft's side than on Apple's. Yet even as a fragile truce was forged to keep Microsoft on board for the Macintosh launch, the broader business landscape was shifting rapidly. By the end of 1983, successive failures, the Apple III flops, and the underwhelming Lisa had sent Apple's fortunes tumbling. At the same time, IBM's introduction of the PC XT, which soon dominated over 76% of the market, squeezed the venerable Apple II out of favor. In a bold bid to regain momentum, Apple unveiled its iconic 1984 Super Bowl ad, casting IBM as the oppressive big brother from Orwell's dystopia and positioning itself as the daring rebel. The advertisement became an instant classic, generating buzz that reverberated throughout the industry. Under the immense pressure of public expectations, the long-anticipated Macintosh finally hit the market. Job design, imbued with its characteristic elegance, initially sold over 100,000 units in just 6 months. However, early excitement soon gave way to disappointment as users discovered design trade-offs like the decision to forego a cooling fan, which, while reducing noise, earned the Macintosh the unflattering nickname the toaster. By late 1984, monthly sales had dwindled below 10,000 units, and internal tensions at Apple escalated. In July 1985, CEO John Sculley, a high-profile hire from PepsiCo, ousted Jobs for allegedly sowing internal division and incurring losses. Almost immediately afterward, Sculley struck a deal with Gates that allowed Microsoft limited use of Macintosh technology in Windows 1.0 on the condition that Microsoft would continue developing software for Apple. The ensuing years saw further shifts in the industry. Microsoft, buoyed by its resilience and ever-improving GUI offerings, Windows 2.0 in 1988 and the breakthrough Windows 3.0 in 1990, gradually transformed from an IBM follower to a dominant force in the PC market. Meanwhile, Apple's fortunes waned further under Sculley's stewardship until a dramatic turnaround in 1997. By that time, Apple was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. In a bold move to save the company, CEO Gil Amelio considered acquiring Next, the computer company founded by the recently ousted Jobs. Although Gates reportedly warned against the purchase, claiming that Next's technology was overrated and that Jobs was more a charismatic salesman than a technical visionary, however, the deal went through. Apple bought Next for $400 million, and Jobs soon returned not as a subordinate, but as a transformative leader determined to reclaim Apple's soul. In July 1997, amid sweeping leadership changes and a radical restructuring of Apple's product line, Jobs set out to mend the bitter relationship with Microsoft. When Gates received an unexpected call from Jobs, forget the past. Let's talk directly. The stage was set for one of the most historic reconciliations in tech history. Just a day later, the two reached an agreement. At the 1997 Macworld Conference, Jobs stunned the audience by announcing that Apple and Microsoft were entering a new era of cooperation. As part of the deal, Apple would drop its long-standing litigation against Microsoft, and controversially Internet Explorer would become the default browser on Apple machines. In return, Microsoft invested $150 million in Apple with the shares locked in for at least 3 years, providing a much-needed lifeline to the struggling company. Gates even made a satellite appearance at the conference, his image looming large on the screen in a manner reminiscent of the Big Brother from Apple's 1984 ad. Jobs declared that the age of bitter rivalry between Apple and Microsoft was over, even if, beneath the surface, complex negotiations and mutual suspicions would persist for years to come. Ultimately, the partnership served both sides. For Microsoft, backing Apple helped defuse mounting antitrust pressures from the U.S. government, a move that ensured the desktop market would remain pluralistic, rather than dominated by a single giant. For Apple, the infusion of capital in the renewed software alliance paved the way for a dramatic reinvention. Within a few short years, as the PC era began to plateau, Jobs steered Apple toward a bold new frontier: mobile technology. With the introduction of the iPhone in 2007, Apple not only redefined consumer electronics but also shifted the entire competitive landscape away from the stagnant PC wars. In retrospect, the saga of Jobs and Gates encapsulates one of the most dynamic periods in modern technology, a time when fierce rivalries, strategic compromises, and visionary breakthroughs reshaped an entire industry. Today, while both companies continue to evolve in an ever-changing world, the story of their early battles and uneasy alliances remains a powerful reminder. In technology, innovation is a relentless race, and even the greatest competitors can sometimes become unexpected partners in the quest to redefine our future. That's the end of this story. Thank you for joining me on this journey through tech history. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the art of innovation, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below.